At 1:13 a.m., my phone lit the ceiling with that sterile, hospital white glow, and an Uber receipt I never ordered slid onto the lock screen. My card charged, my name on the trip. The drop off needle sunk straight into a downtown hotel like a pin through a butterfly that didn't know it had been caught. I lay there listening to the radiator knock like a restless neighbor, telling myself not to overreact, not to shape a nightmare out of a notification. But the charge hit my account because he'd added himself to my family profile for safety after my flat tire on I-94 last winter. And if that was the story we built together, if protection was the architecture, then why was the first proof of it a ride I didn't recognize to a place we'd never gone? He swore the shared profile was a kindness, a way to get home together from late dinners when the subway went down, a way to tie our two lives into one smooth route, and I wanted to believe it the way you want to believe seatbelts always hold and airbags always bloom. I texted before my courage could talk me out of it, thumb steady, words calm, and he immediately replied, "Already home," attaching a dark bedroom photo that could have been taken at any hour on any night. The kind of picture built for plausible deniability, grainy shadows, the suggestion of a nightstand, the smear of a lampshade, and no proof of breath in the air besides the practiced casualness of a message sent 5 seconds too fast, as if speed were a synonym for truth. He wrote, "Go back to sleep," which landed like a pat on the head, soft enough to pass as care, firm enough to feel like control. When I opened the receipt, my pulse shifted from flutter to thud. The pickup sat 2 blocks from his friend's apartment, the one with the vintage pinball machines and the open-door Saturdays, and the blue route threaded through a grid I knew better than my own palm lines, past the late-night deli with the sad neon pineapple and the mural of the fox with a crown, into Seabright Tower Hotel, not the glamorous front entrance under the chandelier, but the service alley behind the loading bay where the map labels shrink and the streets have numbers instead of names. The drop-off rear entrance footer didn't flinch. It was typed into the digital paper like a fact baked into the crust. Because you don't blow up a life at 1:15 a.m. I did what you do when you're trying to salvage the good story. I rationalized. I Googled the hotel to check if the lobby bar was still open and found a polished site promising oysters until 2 and a piano 3 nights a week. And I told myself maybe he grabbed a drink with someone. Maybe the driver clicked the wrong button. Maybe the stars let a glitch slip through and this was the night it chose our apartment for a prank. I stared at images of velvet banquettes and men in suits I wanted to resent, and felt a thin, embarrassed hope unspool, because hope is the cheapest anesthetic, and I had been taught to use it generously. I have a private ritual when the ground tilts. I screenshot the map, the fare, the pickup timestamp, and the anonymous cartoon avatar of the car. Then I file the images into a folder with a name that doesn't scream, a folder that allows me to collect without accusing, and I called this one Weekend, as if I were planning a beach picnic instead of building a record. It calmed me. The small clerical motions, the tap and swipe and rename, a way to turn shaking hands into something steady enough to archive. When I couldn't swallow the stone in my throat alone, I called Talia, my oldest friend, the voice that has talked me down from more cliffs than I will ever admit, and she answered with a yawn that softened me and a laugh that stung, told me the Seabright bar was a local spot, that the back entrance is how everyone goes in after midnight because the valet shuts down, that receipts drift across accounts like pollen, and that I needed sleep more than I needed conspiracy. I let her rock me there on the phone, the soothing hum of her certainties pressing against my ear, while a smaller, colder part of me made a note of how quickly she knew the bar hours and which door was used when the night turned thin. Gaslit confusion tastes like you bit a coin, metal at the back of the tongue, a private nausea you can't show on your face. I lay on my side and watched the bedroom curtain lift and fall, anger icing at the edges, not yet loud enough to boil, promising it would wait until morning because losing your temper at an illusion is another kind of humiliation. I repeated a rule I made in college when the boy I loved called me dramatic for noticing lipstick on his sleeve. Collect first, confront later. Let the facts braid themselves. Stay methodical even when your heart wants to sprint. So I went back into the app to mark the driver's name and the car model and the little 4-digit code that always felt like a secret handshake, and I copied the trip ID as if numbers could be talismans. I set the phone screen down and the room immediately felt too quiet. like the quiet after a smoke alarm cuts out and leaves your skull ringing with a phantom sound. I told myself I could sleep now, that I had done the adult thing, the wise thing, the measured thing, and that truth arrives cleaner in daylight. The screen flared again, and an unknown number forwarded the same receipt with one line beneath it, a neat surgical sentence that snapped everything into focus. Ask him why room 1406. He swore he Ubered home at 11:54. My cart ledger posted 2 back-to-back rides, both ending at the Seabright rear entrance, as if the night had been copied and pasted and hoped I wouldn't notice. The unknown number's message, ask him why, room 1406, still throbbed in the corner of my vision when his text arrived with a practiced mix of concern and fatigue. Babe, I'm already home. Midnight, like I promised? He used that soothing cadence that works on customer support agents and harried waiters, the one that suggests he's the reasonable party and I'm overcooking a misunderstanding. And I could feel the old reflex move through me, the trained instinct to be agreeable, to apologize for seeing what I saw. I pulled up my bank app instead, the digital equivalent of opening a window for oxygen, and the transactions lined up in an unkind row. 2 charges to Uber, 5 minutes apart, both tagged with the same hotel address. Gaslit confusion has a temperature, lukewarm enough to lull, hot enough to scald if you don't set it down, and I refused to let it cool into denial. I went hunting for something that couldn't perform innocence on cue. Email doesn't lie about time zones or whether a photo was taken earlier that week. I typed, "Your Saturday trip" in the search bar, and there it was, a subject line that felt like a raised eyebrow. Your Saturday trip with Daniel. Daniel wasn't one of the usual drivers who populate our neighborhood at that hour, not the woman with the keychain bumblebee, or the retiree who plays Motown and tells stories about Tigers games. The message body let me click through to the receipt, and the receipt led me back to the line that made my stomach harden. Drop off, 400 Seabright Ave. Rear entrance. He doubled down with the confidence of a man who's been believed before. Wasn't me. Must be fraud, he wrote. And then, like a director calling the next shot, just dispute it now so it comes off the statement. The speed of the solution smelled wrong. If you think you've been impersonated, you sit with me and we call together. You don't hustle me toward a delete key before dawn. Simmering anger began to lift its head, not roaring, not yet, but alert, ready to catalog every shade of convenience he tried to drape over the facts. Methodical patience is how I protect myself from the kinds of stories that want to rewrite me. I opened the Uber dashboard on my laptop, navigated past the friendly icons, and exported my trip history as a CSV, the most unromantic file type in the world, rows of coordinates and timestamps that don't care about charm. The columns unfurled like a confession transcribed by a machine. Pickup latitude and longitude, drop-off latitude and longitude, driver ID, vehicle plate, route duration down to the second. I pasted the drop-off coordinates into an online map, watched the red pin land at the mouth of the hotel's service alley, and zoomed until the screen showed the steel-ribbed bay door where deliveries vanish. There was no valet stand to confuse the issue, no grand awning to mislead the cursor. The numbers put him where he said he wasn't. I could hear his voice from a month ago, a night when a welterweight match spilled fans into the street, and we detoured past Seabright. That alley's how the pros avoid paparazzi, he'd said, laughing, like he was letting me peek behind a velvet rope. Back then it sounded like trivia. Now it sounded like rehearsal. We treat jokes like harmless air. Sometimes they're blueprints disguised as banter. He called instead of texting, as if audio could warm the ice between us. He cycled through familiar stations, concern for my stress levels, disappointment at my suspicion, a lecture about how disputing quickly is how you outsmart fraud. I let the words play while I lined up evidence on my screen, one window beside another, and kept my voice even. I'll handle the card, I said, and he said, Great, do it now. And the command nudged the anger from simmer towards steam. When I hung up, I renamed the CSV Weekend Master, a quiet declaration that the story would be told by verifiable things, not by whoever spoke louder at 2 a.m. By late morning, the confusion had burned off into a clarity that didn't need to shout. I walked to Seabright dressed in neutrality. Jeans, a navy sweater, no mascara to smudge, and practiced a calm face in the reflective glass of a storefront I didn't enter. I told myself I wasn't going to accuse anyone of anything. I was going to collect what the world left out in public. The lobby smelled like citrus and old money, the kind of air meant to make you behave. At the host stand by the bar, I put on the most benign voice I own and said I'd been in last night and might have left a silk scarf. Did anyone turn one in? Could I leave a number just in case? The hostess slid a small stack of business cards toward me with the fluid empathy of someone trained to provide a next step even when there isn't one. If you took a car, the driver might have found it, she suggested lightly. We see a lot of lost things. Crisp vindication clicked into place when I lifted the top card. The driver's name embossed across it matched the receipt in my inbox. Daniel. The same name printed in clean hotel font. The same man who, according to my email, had ended his night at the rear entrance of Seabright. The front desk smiled with that bright, chlorinated hospitality and told me there was no guest by his name in-house, no record, no trace, as if my night had been a hallucination, until I said the number the unknown text had given me, and their faces rearranged themselves into caution. I kept my voice even, the way I do when a flight gate agent insists the plane is already full and I can feel impatience licking at my ribs. I left a ring in 14006 last night, I said, placing both hands on the counter like I was surrendering a weapon. Is it in Lost and Found? I didn't blink when the clerk repeated the policy about privacy and the inability to confirm guests, because policies are scripts, and scripts sometimes break when you change the scene partner. She glanced at the colleague to her right, the one wearing a nameplate that said Night Auditor, even though it was nearly noon, and I saw the tiny pause that tells you your hunch landed on something solid. Gaslit confusion wanted to drag me back into apology, to make me chuckle and call myself silly for mixing up numbers. But the simmering anger I'd kept banked beneath my ribs pressed forward with the memory of 2 back-to-back rides and a rear entrance where people go to avoid being seen. The night auditor slid a leather folio out of habit, realized, and tucked it back, then turned to a monitor angled just enough that the corner of the screen reflected in a brass tray of peppermints. She wasn't trying to show me anything, which is why what I saw felt clean. A line on the log ticked past 1:40 a.m., and a key card encoded at 1:42 a.m. populated the row for 1406, issued to a guest with initials that weren't his. I don't need to say his initials for you to understand the jolt of seeing 2 letters that don't belong to the person who says he came home by midnight. Methodical patience steadied my hand against the counter. I thanked them for checking and asked again about the ring, explaining it was my grandmother's and I was clumsy, that I'd understand if it hadn't been turned in. The auditor softened the way people do around grief objects and clicked a different tab, the one that prints little sutim. Oops, we misbilled you. Slips for guests, and a half-formed window bloomed long enough for me to register the breadcrumb I'd come for. 2 room service calls within 20 minutes of each other, both charged to a corporate card. No name on the screen, just the last 4 digits and a company prefix that sounded like a consulting firm. Oysters after 2, I thought, remembering the bar's promises. Champagne too, perhaps, on a card that lets you forget the price of bubbles. I straightened and let my eyes wander with the casual curiosity of someone killing time while a claim is checked, because that's when hotels tell on themselves. Inside a small acrylic trash cup near the printer sat the paper strip that wraps a key card like a hotel's version of a fortune cookie. Room number scribbled in blue ink. The top had been torn, but the numbers that remained began with 14 to 8, and the dash trailed as if someone had been interrupted mid-stroke. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I took a slow breath and made a quiet inventory. The encoded key at 142, the 2 charges, the 14. In a stranger's handwriting. Evidence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it blushes and hopes you're polite enough to ignore it. The concierge materialized with a sympathy smile and the cadence of a fixer. We can call the guest for you, he offered, palms floating up in a pantomime of help. Purely to ask about your ring, of course. False relief can be as intoxicating as the first sip of a drink you know you shouldn't have, and for a split second I wanted to hand him the entire knot and ask him to untangle it. Then I watched the way his eyes slid past my shoulder toward the elevators, a flick that telegraphed allegiance like a flag in a light wind. That would be kind, I said, and turned as if to examine a floral arrangement while he lifted the house phone. Body angled away, voice pitched too low to catch words, but not the intent. I didn't need the transcript to understand the call. I have been in enough rooms where people say she instead of my name to recognize the choreography of a warning. Crisp vindication sharpened in the edges of the world. The business card the hostess had handed me at the bar, Daniel, the same name on my Uber email, sat in my pocket, warm from my palm. The property could insist there was no guest by that name, and it could be technically true, because names are a trick and initials are a mask, and corporations rent the sort of invisibility that makes service doors feel like magic portals. But locks don't care about stories. They care about keycards, and keycards gossip more honestly than lovers do. I asked to leave my number for housekeeping, thanked them again for their effort, and stepped back to give space to a couple checking out, the woman in sunglasses big enough to hide a whole face, and the man touching the small of her back with the proprietary tenderness of someone who knows the front entrance well. I didn't feel like a detective. I felt like a person who had finally remembered how to see. The lobby's music, a pleasant hotel jazz that had been water a minute ago, resolved into something with a beat, and the citrus air stopped smelling like wealth and began smelling like disinfectant. I wrote the time on the back of the card because times matter in stories like this, and I was building one that would not bend under someone else's edits. That's when a housekeeper pushed a cart behind me, wheels stuttering over a seam in the marble, and caught in the tread like a pressed leaf was a torn receipt corner stamped in stark black ink with the number I'd been breathing all morning. 14-6. I reached into his winter coat for the spare gloves he always forgets, and my fingers closed around a pale silk hair tie I don't own, soft as a secret, cool from the lining, the kind of object that shouldn't exist in a life that's supposed to be shared and simple and transparent. Gaslit confusion arrived before sound did. I stood in the hallway with the door still open to the February air, coat hanger tilted like a question mark, and felt my body try to explain the discovery away faster than my brain could name it. Maybe it fell from a stranger on the subway. Maybe it hitchhiked on a dry cleaning bag. Maybe it was mine in another life and I had forgotten, which is exactly the kind of story women are trained to tell themselves when something bright and out of place lands in their palm and starts a clock ticking. He walked in from the kitchen at the shape of my silence, saw the loop of pale fabric in my hand, and smiled like we were play acting. "That's yours," he said, easy as a bartender pouring another round. "It came off your ponytail Tuesday." I let the claim hang between us like steam from a kettle and answered in the same even voice I'd used at the front desk. "I don't wear silk, and I don't wear that color." He shrugged, offered provenance with a wave. Maybe laundry mixed it in. Maybe a friend borrowed my coat. Maybe I left it in his car and he saved it for me. And each maybe arrived with the faintest suggestion that I had been careless, that the real story lived not in the object but in my forgetfulness. Simmering anger raised its head in my ribs, not wild, not theatrical, just present, the way heat gathers under a lid. I turned the hair tie in the light and saw what fabric tries to hide. At the seam where the silk met, a tiny metal clasp, 2 engraved letters caught the afternoon like fish scales. "Sti." Not a brand I recognized, not a monogram of someone we knew. The same 2 initials etched across the hotel's menus, embossed on the bathrobes that never leave the room, stitched into the slippers that make people think about staying a little longer. I placed the loop on the entry table and photographed it beside the Uber map, slide 1 meeting slide 2 on the private evidence board growing inside my phone. In the next photo, I added the business card from the hostess, Daniel, the driver whose name had followed me from inbox to bar, and then the torn corner of a receipt that a housekeeper's cart had delivered to my feet like a message from the building itself. Tap, frame, tap, note. Found in coat pocket, 2:38 p.m. Pale silk, Sti clasp. Methodical patience has a sound when you're alone. It's the soft arithmetic of naming what you can prove and setting it gently where no one can edit it while you sleep. Because I am not a jury and my kitchen is not a courtroom, I called Talia for something less formal and more human, and she gave me exactly what people give when you want to be talked back into comfort. "A hair tie?" She laughed, light and familiar, the tone of girlfriends in sitcoms who drop their shoulders and stop taking themselves so seriously. "Those are like pennies. They migrate. I probably dropped one in your coat last month. Don't make a federal case out of elastic." She nudged me toward trust the way a hand on your elbow can steer you into a different lane without force, and I nearly let her, because friendship is a muscle memory, and it's tempting to lean on it even when it's sore. I told her about the clasp, two initials that matched the hotel, and she made a soft sound I couldn't parse, surprise maybe, or annoyance at coincidence, then said, "Hotels buy in bulk, everyone's tea." He hovered in the doorway like a man who doesn't want to interrupt a call that benefits him. When I hung up, he asked if I wanted him to run to the bodega for seltzer, a peace offering disguised as hydration, and I said I was fine. He wiped a non-existent speck from the table, glanced at the hair tie, and repeated almost amused, "It's yours." I remembered a Sunday in October, a lazy morning that looked honest at the time, when he traced the hotel skyline on a map with his finger and said, "We should do a Seabright staycation sometime. Order room service, disappear." Back then it sounded like intimacy. Now it sounded like handwriting on the strip around a key card, blue ink that trails off when someone approaches the desk. I bagged the hair tie in a sandwich bag like evidence from a scene with no police, and wrote the date across the top with a Sharpie that bleeds a little. The silk smelled faintly of something I've never owned, powdery, floral, the kind of scent they mist into department store air. But beneath it, after a minute, lived a warm note I recognized from 100 double espresso mornings and thrift store Saturdays with Talia, a perfume she swears is barely there. I told myself I was reaching. I told myself smell is a liar. I told myself the nose wants patterns and will make them out of smoke. Instead of confronting, I tested. I left the bag on the dresser and went to brush my teeth, counting to 60, and when I came back it had been moved a quarter inch closer to the edge, a small nervous edit in a room that should have been still. Crisp vindication didn't arrive in a trumpet blast. It arrived as a vibration on the entry table, the unknown number lighting my phone like a match in a dark theater, and when I opened the message, the night assembled itself with pitiless clarity, a photo of him at the Seabright Valet, time-stamped 1:39 a.m., his face in three-quarter profile under the awning lights, and just inside the right edge of the frame, the camel-colored jacket sleeve I know as intimately as my own, Talia's, the cuff button glinting like a tell. I tapped Report a Lost Item in the app with a steadiness I did not feel, and before the page could finish loading a number rang my phone, the driver calling back within minutes like a witness stepping into the light because someone finally asked the right question. Gaslit confusion still hummed from the night before, that soft undermining buzz that makes you doubt the weight of your own evidence even as it presses into your palm. The photo from the unknown number, his face under Seabright's awning, the camel-colored sleeve at the frame's edge, looped in my head while the line clicked and a warm Midwestern voice said my name as if we were neighbors. He apologized for the delay that hadn't existed, asked what I lost, and I told the cleanest version of the story. A small silk hair tie, pale, possibly left behind last night. He took a beat, and I could hear the soft arithmetic of recall, a driver's catalog of faces and destinations, and then he said he remembered the ride. No hesitation, 2 passengers. Quiet, asked for the rear entrance. No luggage, no small talk, a route he could take blind. Simmering anger rose with the specificity. He didn't say a couple. He said 2 passengers. Neutral, factual, the way you testify when you want your words to hold up in cruel daylight. He added a detail that landed like a hand on my sternum. The man tipped in cash, folded bills, quick handoff, a comment about keeping it off the app, which the receipt would never show because receipts are honest about everything except secrets designed to live in shadows. My card had paid for the trip. His pocket had sterilized the tip. The driver sounded more amused than offended. Happens sometimes when folks want to be private. And the word private felt suddenly too small for what had been happening inches from my life. Methodical patience kept my voice in the shallow end. I asked about the time, and he said the pickup pinged around 1:28 a.m., the drop at Seabright's rear entrance just before 1:40, the alley where catering deliveries back up and late-night guests slip in with their heads down. He mentioned a woman wore a camel coat, long belt tied in a lazy knot, and when she leaned to adjust her heel beneath the streetlight, a gold wristwatch flashed and caught his eye. No diamonds, no extra face, just clean and warm the way old money looks in jewelry store cases. I closed my eyes because I didn't need the description. I could feel the watch's small weight on my own wrist from 100 borrowed moments with Talia, who sets hers 5 minutes fast to win the day, who checks it with a tap when she's pretending not to check her phone, who once pressed it into my palm in a bathroom line and said, "Hold this, I hate soap on metal." I asked the driver gently if he could recognize them again. There was no theatrical pause, no drama, just the certainty of a man who spends his nights noticing. "Sure," he said. Especially her. She had a way of saying thank you like a question, like she wanted to leave quickly but not be rude. The picture sharpened with that line, the posture, the half-turn, the practiced exit, and I felt anger resolve from heat into shape. He's been counting on the blur, I thought. The way our brains smear night into forgivable softness, he's been building his alibi from the idea that details don't survive last call. The driver asked, while he had me, whether I'd like him to swing by the hotel to ask about the hair tie, which sounded absurd and kind in equal measure. I told him no, that wasn't necessary, thanked him for remembering, and asked if he had any notes on the trip beyond the app. He chuckled and said he sometimes saves dashcam stills for safety, especially around hotels where arguments pop as fast as flashbulbs, and the word safety braided with my own. The family profile he'd sold me as protection, the brittle irony of who gets shielded and who gets exposed. I gave the driver my email in case he found anything wedged under a seat, and he asked for my number in case the stills looked useful. My phone felt heavy against my ear, too warm, as if it had absorbed all the nights I had waved away doubt in the name of being cool and modern and unbothered. When we hung up, I sat with the apartment's thin morning light and let the emotional weather move through its sequence without trying to outrun it. Confusion had been engineered, anger had been earned. Patience was the bridge I kept crossing even when it shook. Crisp vindication was not a thunderclap yet, just a pressure shift, like the door breathing before a storm arrives. I opened my laptop, pulled the photos into a single album, Uber map, hostess card with the driver's name, the salvage receipt corner stamped 1406, the silk loop bagged and labeled, and added a note, cash tip off app, camel coat, gold watch. I stared at the last two words until they split into their own story, gold watch, and thought about the tiny quirk only I ever noticed, how Talia's minute hand always sits a fraction forward, chasing time like prey, 5 minutes fast in every room we've ever entered together. The phone buzzed, and the driver's text arrived with no preamble, just a small stack of images and the line he'd promised. Dashcam stills he keeps for safety. I opened the first, zoomed, and felt the room tilt into focus. The woman's profile caught mid-turn at the rear entrance, the camel collar lifting in a draft, the gleam at her wrist like a metronome set ahead of the beat, and my own breath answered before my brain could edit the truth. It looked like Talia. She showed up before noon with still warm croissants and the kind of soft voice people use when they plan to rearrange your memory. Told me I was spiraling, kissed the air beside my cheek, and suggested we reset by deleting the receipts so we could move forward like reasonable adults who don't let screenshots run their lives. Gaslit confusion works best when it wears concern, and Talia draped it over my shoulders like a cardigan, fussing with crumbs on the counter, asking for plates, and narrating a future in which nothing had happened except my stress, which could be solved with pastry and perspective and a little maintenance on the story I was telling myself. A phrase I used to love in therapy when it helped me separate fact from fear, and now sounded like a locksmith picking at my confidence. She reached for my phone as if she were offering to take out the trash, said I could airdrop anything important to a backup and clear the rest so I could breathe, and I felt the first sting of simmering anger rise. Not the dramatic kind that slams doors, but the clean, precise heat that says my brain is not a crime scene and my notes are not negotiable. I asked to see her camera roll from last night, pitched casual and affectionate, because if she had been where she said she'd been, then the thumbnails would show cardboard boxes and a cousin's messy apartment instead of a hotel bar and a rear entrance, and she laughed in this new brittle register that reminded me of a glass fork you can only use once, called it privacy, said we didn't owe each other a surveillance state, and widened her eyes in disappointment that I'd even ask, which is its own kind of refusal dressed as values. I said I understood, which was partly true, and I poured coffee I didn't drink while my patience braided itself into a rope I could hold. Breadcrumbs rarely announce themselves. They show up as clutter. Talia asked if she could borrow a charger and tipped the contents of her tote onto the table so she could dig for the cord. And in the drift of lipstick and receipts and a lint velvet lint roller, I saw a navy matchbook with its seam rubbed pale and a crest stamped in silver that any downtown regular could identify without squinting. Seabright Tower, the S looping through the T like a secret handshake. I didn't touch it, because touching would make it a fight. I just let my eyes land and lift and land again, slow and quiet, the way you read a road sign in fog. She saw where I was looking and moved the matchbook under a takeout menu, talking brighter, louder, a cheerier weather report, as if volume could turn a crest into a coincidence. She started telling me about her cousin's move, a story with too much furniture in it, street names, cross streets, the exact number of boxes, the color of packing tape, the way the elevator smelled like hot pennies, and each new specificity felt less like memory and more like plaster poured into a mold. She mentioned a bodega on a corner I know doesn't exist, and a dog I've never met with a breed she mispronounced, and the anger in me tightened to a wire while my face stayed kind, because methodical patience isn't passivity. It's the strategy you use when the room insists your eyes are lying. I tucked the bagged hair tie deeper into my hoodie pocket and nodded the way you nod at a toddler who swears they didn't draw on the wall. He arrived mid-sentence with his own performance ready, keys loud on the hook, shoulders soft with practiced injury, and the first thing he said was that he felt violated that I'd hacked his rides, as if a shared family profile were a vault I'd cracked instead of a tool he sold me as safety. And he pivoted so fast into disappointed coach voice that for a second I saw myself from above, a woman who needed to apologize for looking at charges on her own card. He proposed a solution that would bless the day and save our weekend. Delete the receipts, dispute the transactions, and take a digital Sabbath so we could reconnect like grown-ups who trust. It was almost beautiful, the choreography of absolution that required my erasure. When he hugged Talia hello, their bodies made a shape I've seen 1,000 times. Friends, easy, familiar. But this time, it lasted one beat longer than it should have. The beat where most people release, but they didn't. Where his hand rested on her shoulder. And then remembered me watching and traveled away. The gold watch at her wrist flashed as she stepped back, and in the little shine I could feel the 5-minute lead only I ever counted. The way she likes time to break in her favor. Always just ahead of us. Always already there. I suggested with the calm of a woman sharpening a pencil that we call the bank together, that we call the driver together, that we walk into Seabright at the same hour tonight and ask for what the logs would give anyone who knew what to request. And they both smiled with the tightness of people who have memorized a line and don't like ad-libbing. He said we shouldn't escalate, and she agreed it would be embarrassing. And the word sat between us like a trap set for me, and baited with my own self-consciousness. I stacked their croissant plates, rinsed them, and let the water run until it went cold, because that's what patience feels like when you refuse to be rushed into forgetting. My phone vibrated where I'd hidden it under a dish towel, a text sliding onto the screen with the clarity of a stage cue I had been waiting for without admitting it to myself. And this time the unknown number did not disguise itself or play riddles or pretend to be a ghost in a machine. It stepped into the room with a name and an instruction that clicked every loose piece into place. Front desk, Seabright. If you want the truth, come at 11 p.m. Bring the hair tie. Another Uber receipt landed with the same blunt tone as a fire alarm. Same hotel, same rear entrance, while he sat on my couch in sweats, claiming he was too tired to go out, thumb idly scrolling trailers, voice turned down to a hush meant for sick rooms and Sunday mornings, as if fatigue were a witness in his corner, and I was cross-examining exhaustion itself. I didn't blink at the TV. I watched the corner of my phone where truth prefers to arrive without ceremony. The charge posted against my card as neatly as a grocery run. He stretched, did that theatrical wince he uses to make a day sound longer, and asked if we could order Thai and call it a night. Gaslit confusion knocked on the door with its familiar bouquet. Maybe the app glitched. Maybe a scheduled ride went off like a forgotten alarm. Maybe reality was the picture of him 2 feet away and not the route line threading back to the service alley of Seabright Tower. I opened the live location he once shared with me after a snowstorm and never revoked. The gray dot froze for a long, guilty second and then jumped toward the river like a rabbit bolting for cover. Weird, he said without looking up, as if I'd spoken my thoughts out loud. Phones are drunk on Saturdays. The breadcrumb glowed by itself, his smartwatch lit with a delicate buzz I felt in my own wrist. The screen tilted just enough to catch the notification in the TV's reflection. Your ride with Daniel is arriving. I heard the swallow before I heard his explanation. Spam, he said. I keep getting those. Daniel must be a popular guy. He laughed a beat late, like an actor finding his line on the floor. Simmering anger rose in me with a clean edge, not the kind that wants to shout, but the kind that wants to label and shelve and keep, a librarian of harm. I suggested a movie night like Immersi and cued a familiar comfort film I didn't intend to watch, turned the volume up to a benevolent cloud, then slipped onto the fire escape under the pretense of checking the weather. Cold air steadied me the way facts do. From that narrow metal balcony, I could still see his silhouette reflected in our window, head tipped back, arm draped along the cushion in a tableau of domestic peace that would photograph beautifully for a catalog. Methodical patience guided my fingers to the driver's recent calls. I tapped the number labeled Daniel and asked, in the same careful voice I used with the night auditor, whether he had just picked up a rider on our account and where he had dropped him. The driver didn't hunt for his memory. He recognized my name, said he'd just pulled away from Seabright's rear entrance, that he'd dropped your guy off under the loading bay lights because the front was a mess with wedding photos, and that the time would read 8:57 if I checked. I watched the couch silhouette in my window lift a glass and swallowed a laugh that wasn't humor. You're sure? I asked, and he added details I couldn't relax away. Same hoodie, same posture in the back seat, same request to tip in cash, and a woman in a camel coat who checked a gold watch like the night owed her interest. Happens more than you'd think, he said gently, as if he could hear my heart aligning with evidence. I thanked him, saved the call log, and stepped back inside with a face I'd practiced in mirrors since I was 12, the expression that says I am fine, and I am listening, and I am not a woman calling the police on my own instincts. He smiled at me from the couch, asked if I could grab the blanket, and the blanket, our blanket, suddenly looked like a prop. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, flipped face down. He glanced at it but didn't move. I palmed it and read the message while pretending to check the takeout ETA. Don't go there. You'll regret what you see. Talia. No greeting, no punctuation beyond the blade of the sentence. My anger sharpened. A filament pulled taut. How did she know a place I hadn't said aloud? Why was she guarding a door I hadn't announced I'd walk through? He started a monologue about trust and fatigue and how couples choose not to dig up every molehill into a mountain, the kind of speech that ends in a hug and the promise of better communication. But the words sounded like a blanket thrown over a body in a crime show. I set chopsticks on the counter like I might use them and tucked the bagged hair tie into my pocket, silk rustling against plastic like a small heartbeat. I'll go grab seltzer, I said, and kissed his temple the way you kiss a sleeping dog so it doesn't wake. He turned his face into the cushion and murmured assent. The live location dot froze again, repentant. I slipped my keys into my coat with the focus of someone threading a needle in a moving car. Seabright's lobby felt colder this time. The citrus swapped for something metallic. I did not ask for a guest list. I did not say a name. I approached the clerk with the posture of a person who belongs, and said I needed the guest Wi-Fi to upload a document for a friend upstairs. She slid a small card across the counter, coded and crisp from a thermal printer, smiling the way service smiles when it assumes you already have what you need. I scanned the QR, and the login portal bloomed on my phone, 2 fields blinking, and then without my typing, like a magician completing a trick I had not agreed to, the room number line populated itself from the network's memory, a soft gray autofill that felt like a verdict inked by the building. 1406. I don't beg for camera footage. I take an empty stool at the lobby bar, set my phone face down beside the napkin, and let the story sell itself while the room hums with the kind of music that makes people mispronounce truth as ambience. The guest Wi-Fi has already tried to finish my sentence, 1406 sliding into the login field like a reflex the building can't suppress. So I treat that as permission to sit still and look like I belong. Gaslit confusion hovers at the edge of my mind, suggesting I could still be wrong. That autofill is a trick of cached data and not a key under the mat, but the bartender breaks that spell without even meaning to. She clocks the silk loop on the napkin, the one I've carried like a talisman in a sandwich bag, and her face performs recognition before her mouth does. "Oh, that," she says, lowering her voice the way people do with gossip they intend to frame as customer service. "We sent one of those upstairs on a room charge last night, 1406. The woman said she was forever losing them." She laughs like it's a charming habit and not a breadcrumb that glows in the dark. Simmering anger rises, polite, contained, sharpened by manners, and I ask for seltzer with lime to keep my hands busy while my spine remembers it has a job. I ask about the woman in the tone of a friend trying to return something without making it weird, and the bartender obliges with the details hospitality always notices first. Camel coat, belt knotted, lips the color of berries, a gold wristwatch that flashed when she signed the slip, even though there was no bill to sign, just a lazy room charge scrawled with the room number and the kind of signature people use when they feel anonymous. "She tipped too," the bartender adds, "but on the room," and the word room lands like a stamp. No cash folded under a saucer tonight, everything routed through a number that has become a character in our story. Methodical patience asks me to widen the frame, so I do. The trio by the baby grand isn't a trio tonight. It's a single guitarist looping chords while glancing at his phone between measures, and when his break starts, he props the phone against a martini glass and goes live, the small red badge announcing to strangers that he is here, now, creating. I angle my stool without making noise and watch his camera wander. It pans across the glassy dark of the bar, skims a pair of tourists mispronouncing the Pinot, swings toward the lounge seating, and catches, for less than a second, a table for two where my boyfriend leans forward like a man receiving a confession, his face in profile, the curve of his shoulder unmistakable even in pixelated light. The second person sits mostly in shadow, but the camel coat does not. The room makes its introduction without my asking. I DM'd the musician because the simplest requests work best. "Loved your set. Could I buy a clip of your live from last night?" It caught a friend, and I want to tease him. The tease is a lie, but the sentiment is close enough to the truth that it moves easily through my fingers. He writes back with the readiness of artists who understand that money, even small money, is yes-shaped. I offer to Venmo for his time, and he refuses, sending the clip with a little pride I find disarming. The file lands with its own metadata, the platform's timestamp, the hotel's tag location, the time code tucked in the corner like a neon post-it. I line it up against the Uber receipt on my screen, 1:39 a.m. drop at the rear entrance, and feel the click when they meet. The videos sweep past my boyfriend stamped at 1:41, the kind of alignment conspiracy theorists dream of, and I have, to my surprise, earned by simply watching. I could stop there, armed with an alignment neat enough to frame, but patience says, take one more step they can't wriggle past. The night auditor from earlier recognizes me with professional neutrality, the way front-of-house staff learn to drain expression from recognition. I don't ask for guest data, I ask for instruction. "I think I was misbilled," I say, truth adjacent. How would I dispute something charged in error? She prints a demo mini folio, a sample showing the fields a guest would see, and for a heartbeat she forgets she's supposed to shield the screen. The paper curls warm into my hand, and there it is in the blandest font possible. 1406, Bar Lounge, 2:07 a.m., itemized under a corporate code that will matter tomorrow. Crisp vindication doesn't crow. It breathes out, low and even, like a runner easing into stride. I thank her, fold the slip into my wallet, and on cue, the concierge appears with the same helpful face from earlier, only softer at the edges, like a photograph of someone's better self. "Any luck?" he asks, performing concern, and when he turns away to answer the house phone, I hear the sentence he intended me not to hear, the whisper of someone who has chosen sides and won't admit it. "She's here," he says, hand over the receiver, a stage whisper that drops the last pretense of neutrality. Simmering anger completes its cycle. I have been managed, redirected, placated, and now announced. I look into the bar mirror where the lobby reflects itself into infinity and see my own expression return to me. Not devastated, not even surprised, just sharpened. A woman rearranging the weight she carries so she can keep walking. Somewhere above us, a number waits on a door. Somewhere between the stool and the service alley, a truth plans to slip out the way it slipped in. I pick up the silk loop and slide it into my pocket the way you pocket a coin for a toll you know is coming. The guitarist starts a new song that has not learned to be melancholy yet. The elevator answers in a polished bell. The doors part, and Talia steps out alone in the same camel coat, eyes already skimming for the back hallway, her pace set to that Goldilocks clip she reserves for exits, and I stand without thinking as she turns toward the rear entrance like the night belongs to her. I will not scream. I will not accuse. I will ask only the questions I already know the answers to, and I will let the answers incriminate themselves. I walked home from Seabright with the silk loop in my pocket and the mini folio warm in my wallet, repeating the rules under my breath the way runners repeat splits. Gaslit confusion tried one last time to bargain. Maybe I misread the coat, maybe the musician's angle was cruel, but the bar mirror had shown me a woman who wasn't drowning. She was calibrating. Simmering anger found a clean lane and stayed there, not swerving, not honking, just moving. Methodical patience took the wheel. At my kitchen table, I texted him with the politeness of a calendar invite, "Can you meet me at our wedding venue walkthrough at noon tomorrow?" He replied too fast, "Of course, can't wait," like a man rescuing his own narrative. I added a second message, "They'll have a conference room open for us to test slides." His thumbs threw back a heart and a thumbs up, two stickers that never had to testify in court. I booked the venue's smallest conference room, the one with soft carpet and a wall monitor meant for Pinterest boards and seating charts. When the coordinator asked what we present, I said, "A little video," and let the silence close around the harmlessness of the phrase. I arrived an hour early and tested AirPlay from every device I own, pushed the button that mirrors a phone into 36 inches of truth, and watched my private album appear like a portfolio on the glass. Uber map pins marching to the rear entrance, the dashcam stills with the Oyster camel collar lifting in a draft, the guest Wi-Fi portal autofilling 1406 like a compulsion, the bar's mini folio with its 2:07 a.m. timestamp, the photograph of the silk hair tie beside the business card. That said Daniel, each file a tile, each tile a step. I built my evidence board the way I arrange a suitcase before a trip, laying everything out where I can see it, forcing myself to choose what earns its place. I rehearsed the sequence aloud until the room learned my rhythm. First, the card charges, then the CSV coordinates. Next, the driver's call log, the dashcam stills, the host stand's business card. I swiped to the mini folio and left it on screen long enough to memorize its antiseptic font. I placed the bagged hair tie on the table like an exhibit, not a provocation. I opened notes and typed the questions I would ask as if I were writing narration for a doc. Where were you at 1:39 a.m.? Who is paying for oysters at 2:07 a.m.? Why does the hotel think 1406 belongs to you? Why does the driver know your tip by the temperature of folded cash? Why does the watch on her wrist run 5 minutes fast? Because it couldn't just be my word. I texted Daniel and asked if he'd be willing to swing by for 5 minutes to return a lost item I believed had been left in the back seat. "Of course," he wrote. And then, after a pause that felt human, he added, "You okay?" I told him I would be. He said he could stop by at 12:20 if that helped. It helped. Truth is sticky when strangers show up to hold it with you. The trap needed bait that looked like brunch, so I invited Talia with a brightness I didn't feel. I said the venue had a cafe attached, and we could try the menu before tastings. I included a photo of the room's windows to make it feel like an errand we'd pretend was fun. She replied with a yes that added a heart to the end of her name, a punctuation mark that used to make me feel chosen and now felt like a brand. For an hour, I practiced the face that meets betrayal without theatrics. I poured water into paper cups and set them in a row the way teachers do before a parent meeting they know will go sideways. Crisp vindication sharpened as noon approached. I placed the remote on the table, screen slept, album cued. I checked my bag, wallet, phone, hair tie, spare charger, a printed copy of the CSV because paper has a different gravity than screens. A part of me, small and stubborn, still tried to design a version of the next hour where this was all a misunderstanding that would turn into a story we told at holidays, about the time technology tried to ruin our engagement and failed. But then my phone vibrated with the text tone I had learned to brace for, and the last piece arrived with the efficiency of a final puzzle click. Minutes before noon, the unknown number, no longer unknown, just unsaved on principle, sent a photo of a key card envelope shot on a speckled counter. His initials were written in the concierge's careful blue, and beneath them, in a second hand that didn't try to disguise itself, the room number that had been haunting every screen in my life. 1406. I hand the venue manager our notice, and he reads it with the clean relief of someone who prefers policy to drama. He refunds the deposit on the spot and asks, without flinching, whether I need security to escort them out. So I slide his apartment key across the table like a dead battery, and he slides the ring box back like it burns. For a heartbeat, the room contains every version of my future at once. The color palettes I'd circled, the seating chart I'd agonized over, the song my mother wanted for the first dance, and then the paper in the manager's hand folds those versions into a neat square, and the air feels breathable again. Gaslit confusion tries to make a last case for working through it, for filing the night under misunderstanding. But the blue of the Seabright key card envelope in my bag outvotes it. Simmering anger, which had kept me upright through the show and tell on the wall monitor, cools into something steadier. Not a blaze, a pilot light. He doesn't plead. He calculates. He asks if we can pause instead of cancel, as if a suspension could reanimate trust, as if reading a contract sideways turns a no into a later. The manager, to his credit, refuses to be drafted as a referee. He prints the cancellation, circles the clause labeled cause, initials the margin, and slides me a copy I will keep like a vaccination record. When we stand, I place my copy of the apartment key in a small stack by the ring box. The metal looks suddenly cheap beside velvet. He touches the box as if it might bite, and when his eyes catch mine and skid away, I understand that we are past the part where charm works. Methodical patience carries me through logistics. I gather our binder, unzip the front pocket, and take inventory like a medic. USB drive with the exported CSV, printout of the mini folio, screenshots of the Wi-Fi autofill, the dashcam stills, the business card with Daniel's name, the bag silk hair tie with ST at the clasp. In an empty conference room down the hall, I email the entire packet to myself and write a subject line I want history to see without explanation. I believe me. IBCC a second account that no one but my sister knows, and I attach a plaintext note that lists times and places in my own voice so the story can't be rewritten later by a better liar. As I'm zipping the binder, Daniel calls to say he's filed a note on his end about off-app cash tips at the hotel's rear entrance. No names, just context. A line in an internal system that will be boring to everyone except the next woman who needs it. He sounds almost apologetic for witnessing what he witnessed, and I thank him until he laughs and tells me to remember to breathe. That kindness lodges somewhere I hadn't realized was empty. Talia's first text arrives as we cross the lobby. It's long enough to require a scroll, threaded with apologies that do the math wrong. It wasn't like that. I was protecting you. We never planned it. And explanations that ask me to become an accomplice in my own erasure. I don't read it. I archive it into a folder called For Later, the Way You Pack Up a Broken Frame You Can't Throw Away Yet. Another text follows, a photo of a blank page, the digital theater of a confession drafted and unsent. I silence the thread because silence is the only boundary that holds in a hallway like this. Crisp vindication doesn't arrive as triumph. It arrives as paperwork. The venue's refunded deposit pings my account. The bank's fraud team acknowledges my upload with a case number that will live in a spreadsheet under a heading called Resolved. I step outside into clean cold and call a locksmith before I can talk myself into waiting until morning. He says he can meet me in an hour. I call my sister second. She hears my voice and says, "Come." There isn't a question in it. At the apartment, I gather what is mine with the calm cadence of a drill. Passport, birth certificate, charger, toothbrush, the dress I wear when I need to feel like the adult in the room. I log out of the family profile we once used like a promise and watch the screen go neutral. I unpair his smartwatch from our Wi-Fi. I change the banking password to a phrase no one has ever said to me. The evidence is enough. When the locksmith finishes and tests the deadbolt, the new click sounds like a punctuation mark I have earned. My sister's sofa is not comfortable, which turns out to be an asset. You can't sink into regret on furniture that keeps you awake. The dog finds my feet and pins them with the serious weight of a creature who has never lied to me. We order pizza, we don't finish and put on a home renovation show where all the walls come down on purpose. The adrenaline ebbs and leaves the good kind of tired, the kind aligned with choice, not defeat. I open my email and reread the subject line in my inbox until the words steady my hands. I believe me. Near midnight, a final message from the venue manager lands with the PDF of the cancellation and a note that reads, "If you need a letter for any vendors, say the word." It's such a small sentence, but it moves something heavy. I draft a list of vendors to contact. I schedule the emails for morning. I turn the phone screen face down and breathe like a person whose house doesn't creak anymore. At 3:02 a.m., the phone vibrates against the coffee table, and the number I didn't save writes one last sentence that tilts the map I thought I had mastered. "You only saw weekends. Check Fridays." I open the CSV again and filter by Fridays, and a pattern blooms like a bruise across the city map. Same pickup clusters, same glide downtown, same stubborn needle pricking the Seabright rear entrance. Not an accident, but a routine wearing a mask. The file doesn't care about how much sleep I got on my sister's sofa or whether the dog sighed when I shifted. It lists coordinates the way the ocean lists waves. Friday night step forward, regular as church. Bells. 7:52 p.m., pickups near his office. 9:11 p.m., returns at pause in the same 2 blocks. 1:36 a.m., drops in the alley behind 400 Seabright. The rows assemble their own paragraph. For each ride, I match the driver ID to a face I now know, and for the late ones, a familiar name appears with an almost tender persistence, Daniel. Like the city itself kept sending me a witness until I learned to listen. Breadcrumbs resolve into architecture once you stop pretending not to see. The hotel's guest Wi-Fi remembers what it remembers. On Fridays, the portal autofills 1406 with the confidence of muscle memory. The bar tabs materialize in my bank log with that indifferent sanitized language that never tells the story but always tells the truth. Bar lounge. Bar lounge 219. Corporate surcharge applied. My photo of the silk hair tie clasp, those tiny SD letters catching the lamp, anchors the corner of the screen like a signature on a deed. The dashcam stills line up in a tidy strip, the camel coat mid-turn, the gold watch catching light, the alley door breathing them in. Gaslit confusion finally runs out of places to hide. I narrate my transformation because I want the record to include the part where I was human. I asked for the truth first, the way I was raised too. I received performance and scaffolding, and an invitation to mistrust my own eyes. I learned the difference between playing fair and being fair. I moved from asking to verifying, from waiting for confessions to building a case that didn't need them. And when the proof assembled itself, I did not bargain with it. I chose myself. There is nothing cinematic about that choice, which is why so many people skip it. It's paperwork and timing and deciding you'll be proud of your future self more than you want comfort tonight. I draw boundaries out loud so they live somewhere besides my chest. No shared payments with anyone I haven't known long enough to memorize the sound of their conscience. No shared locations except for emergencies and always with an expiration. No shared story without evidence that survives a night's sleep. I keep the family profile feature off and the receipts on. I teach my phone a new habit. My name first, my accounts separate, my backups automatic. I promise myself to treat doubt as a smoke alarm instead of a decor choice I learned to ignore. The justice payoff arrives in emails instead of fireworks, which turns out to be the right scale for a life. The venue manager forwards a blacklist update with his dry, decent humor, a reminder that events can be canceled for cause and that not every pretty picture deserves a party. HR at his company replies to my note with a phrase that carries both weight and mercy. Will audit the corporate card associated with the Seabright charges. And a week later, a compliance officer calls to say they've discovered improper use and initiated reimbursement policies that are, in her words, not optional. I don't ask for details. They don't ask me for more than I've already given. The world is not suddenly fair, but it is, for a moment, proportionate. I write what I wish someone had handed me the first night the screen lit my ceiling. Start a folder with a name that comforts you. Screenshot the map and the time, and the tiny identifiers people assume don't matter. Export the CSV because numbers forget to lie. When you feel tempted to apologize for looking, remember that trust without verification is not tenderness, it's abdication. Give yourself a witness, friend, sister, driver, manager, and let their ordinary decency anchor you when charm tries to unmoor the facts. Keep objects that don't belong to you long enough to learn what they're saying. When your body tells you to slow down, slow down. When it tells you to leave, leave. Crisp vindication is quieter than revenge fantasies promised me. It tastes like cool water. I sleep through Thursday and wake on Friday to an inbox that doesn't make my hands shake. I forward the packet to a future-only email I created for this purpose, then archive the thread and shut the laptop. I walk past Seabright on purpose and do not look up. The city doesn't tip its hat or apologize. It just keeps moving, and so do I. This story will be retold not as a parable about betrayal, but as a map lesson. Patterns don't care whether you are ready to see them. They will keep drawing themselves until you learn to read. If you were me, would you confront sooner or wait until the map tells the whole story? Made it to the end? Comment 1406 and tell me, confront sooner or wait for the map. Drop one piece of evidence you'd add to my checklist. I'll pin the most useful. Share this with someone who needs proof more than promises, and if receipts beat excuses for you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Next episode unpacks the Friday pattern.